Welcome to Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates, where we explore what it truly means to be an administrative professional in today's world. I'm Melissa Mahoney, CEO of the International Association of Administrative Professionals.
And I'm Rachel Suman, CXO of IAAP. We're not just leaders in this field. We're advocates, champions, and former admins ourselves.
That's right, Rachel. This podcast isn't your typical industry talk. We're here to bring you real conversations, real stories, and real solutions.
From AI to self-awareness journeys, we're here to discuss the deep issues that admins face every day, drawing from our own experiences and those of our community.
So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out on your administrative journey, join us as we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
Get ready for authentic insights, candid conversations, and a whole lot of inspiration. This is Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates. Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. Welcome back to episode 5 of Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates. We are excited is too little of a word. We are uber thrilled to be talking about today's topic of feedback and self-awareness. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Mel, but I will just say feedback and self-awareness is one of my favorite topics because I feel like in the chasm of leadership skills that are out there, these two married together are the most impactful game changers when we really get it.
100% agree. And there's no thunder stealing here. We are both equally as excited and thrilled to talk about this because it has, I think, changed both of our leadership journeys tremendously and just our lives. If we think about the impactful parts of leadership competencies, this has been the most impactful, I think, to both of us. So we share that experience and also share that it isn't always a super fun experience, but very, very impactful. Feedback and self-awareness can actually change the game for you and your role, whether you are looking to change roles, move up in your role, or just be the best kick-ass person you can be in your current role. Yeah. Apologies for the beep, the expletive, but it was necessary because that is how impactful feedback and self-awareness can be to you leveling up, whether you're looking to level up in your current space or level up, literally leveling up to a different position or a higher position.
Yeah. Yeah. And even to your point, as a human, we all know those people in our lives who are not self-aware, and us included. So, this is not a judgment situation, but those people that just, maybe the better aspect of this is, those people who just seem to have it together. They move through life in a beautiful, fluid way. And I guarantee they have a really healthy dose of self-awareness.
Yes. Or they're really good at masking. One of the other.
Which is a separate
It could be a little bit of both too. Because we all have our days. We all have our days where we're putting the suit on even when we don't feel like it.
We do. But it's hard to do that long term. So if this is somebody that you've known and they are continually doing that, then self-awareness is probably their magic pill that they use.
Absolutely.
But let's start with a definition. Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. Yes, that's where I was headed.
And we'll start with self-awareness in that definition. And so I'm going to give a little shout out. I'm going to read it and then I'll show it for those that are watching via video. But this book, Insight by Dr. Tasha Urick, is absolutely incredible. I love it. Anybody who is interested in kind of going down the path of self-awareness and learning more about it, it is, I do not get any type of kickback or anything. I really love the book. It takes a science-based approach to self-awareness. But her definition in the book for self-awareness is really great. And we would like to use that for the purposes of today's podcast. So her definition is self-awareness is at its core, the ability to see ourselves clearly, to understand who we are, how others see us, and how we fit into the world. There's a lot in there. Do we want to unpack that at all about self-awareness and talk a little bit about self-management and self-mastery?
Yes, I think it's a beautiful definition. I think it encompasses the real heart of what self-awareness really means. And obviously it is about self. And if you think about, a mirror and looking at your reflection and really discerning what you see there, if you could do that for your mind, body, spirit, all of the things internally, that's really what self-awareness is. If we could look in the mirror and see all of those things, that is the goal, the aim. So I love the definition because it puts some teeth to what we mean, because it can feel very ethereal or, unattainable, because it isn't as easy as holding up a mirror and actually looking at it and seeing oh, I have a freckle here, or I have an eyelash that's out of place. You don't get that experience when we're talking about self-awareness. So it gives you some access to things like self-management, talking about regulation. And, it's one thing to identify when you have a response or reaction to something. It's an entirely different thing to understand how it affects your behavior, how it affects your thought processes, how it affects how you show up, how it affects your tone of voice. How does it affect your facial expression? How does it affect your body language? When you start to understand that those are the impacts, and then you can start to change or navigate those responses, that's what self-management means, is you're actually interrupting or disrupting some of those those immediate reaction responses, because you understand the impact that they have on the world around you, the people around you, the decisions that you make. Self-management can be as easy as a timeout or a pause to just reflect about what's happening. So I think that's how I would describe or define self-management. What would you say about self-mastery?
I think self-mastery for me is actually being able, to your point with self-management, is kind of that next step. That definition of self-awareness speaks to feedback, right? Like how others see us, how we fit in the world. We cannot, to your point, that is not a mirror. We cannot do that absent of other people and feedback. So self-mastery, I think, takes all of those pieces together, your own self-reflection, taking the qualified feedback, which, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about later in the episode, and putting all of that together to realize and recognize who you are as a human, who you want to be in the world, how you want to fit, how you want to show up, the impact that you wish to create around you, and then be able to literally master that. I'm air quoting it, but I think it fits, in spite of the emotions you may be feeling, the triggers that you are experiencing, the humanness that we all have. As a self-mastery expert, if I may use that word, you are able to see beyond that and think about, this is the impact I want to have, this is how I want to show up, and do that again in spite of whatever you may be feeling. And this isn't, I'm hearing myself say this, and this isn't about being a robot. This isn't about putting on a show. This isn't about being inauthentic to who you are. That's not at all. I want to clarify that, because this is still being true to who you are and recognizing the impact that you want to have. So some people are not going to love you, and that's okay. That is not what we're saying. Everybody doesn't have to be happy. Everybody doesn't have to love you, but
you just made all the people pleasers, their palms started sweating.
right. Wait. But it's true, I mean, we're not pizza. We can't make everybody happy. And so that is not our goal. Our goal is to, I believe, as professionals, and dare I say humans, to create the best world around us by being our best selves. And that really, I think, self-awareness and self-mastery helps us achieve that.
It is a never-ending journey. So even when we say self-mastery, it sounds like a completion, and it really isn't. So self-actualization, it's going to continue to evolve, because guess what? As you start to grow and learn more about yourself, you also grow and you evolve. So it can feel a little frustrating, especially for people who are achievers. We're like, well, I know, but I'm here. I did it. I have mastered it. We are complete. This is complete. That is not attainable. So I don't want to set people up for unrealistic expectations either, because self-mastery does not mean completion. It actually points to the fact that you should also be raising that bar. So you can actually experience some self-mastery, and then it expands your view, and then that bar gets moved up. So then you're moving along that feedback and self-awareness journey to that self-actualization, but it's constant movement, constant change. At first, that can feel abrasive and maybe not even fulfilling because you're like, well, can we just stop and be comfortable in this space of achievement that, I've reached this pinnacle, this, like, do we have to raise the bar every time? You'll reach a point though in that where it doesn't feel abrasive. It actually feels like you're missing out on something if you don't raise that bar. And we'll talk about that later about, viewing feedback as a gift, and not even viewing feedback as a gift, but experiencing feedback as a gift, and the shift that will happen eventually on this journey for everyone. That shift, it's hard to get there because it can feel so abrasive in the beginning. So I think it's important to make sure that we're clear about that it's not only the act of feedback and the act of self-awareness that can be uncomfortable or not feel great, but the experience of that growth can also not feel great at first, but I promise you it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be very exhausting. Like physically you can feel drained, but you're right. The switch flips, and I could not agree more. There is never an arrival, at least while we are walking this earth and breathing breath. And there's a great part, I think, in all of our journeys within self-awareness and self-mastery that we are able to, the analogy that I'm thinking of is turn back and help others. So once you have reached a point in your journey where it is a little bit easier, you don't feel that drain, that, exhaustion in working on yourself. That's when you have the capacity to say, how can I help others in their awareness journey? How can I help others in the self-actualization and kind of pay it forward, give back to others? So it is a constant cycle, not only for ourselves, but also for others, and helping others in our sphere, in our world, in their own journey.
Absolutely, yes. If we shift over kind of into feedback, because that is the key, as you mentioned, we can't look in the mirror. We have to use feedback from others, feedback from our environment, feedback from people in our sphere to really uncover and unpack all of the things that will make us more self-aware. So let's talk specifically about feedback and how we would define feedback, which is a robust, unfortunately, it's not a very simple definition. I think it's
Oh, the great
it's
things
got
never are.
layers. It's like a cake or an onion.
And I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this episode, and I think it's easy to think of feedback in a negative or
Right.
label. It was good feedback. It was bad feedback.
Criticism. Sometimes
Yeah.
we think of it as criticism.
Yeah. And I think feedback can encompass so many beautiful things. Like there's a positive, affirming feedback that says, you do this really well. Keep doing this, grow in this. This is a strength for you, and this is having really great impact in the world around you. How can you improve that? And then on the additional side of that, I don't want to say flip side of that, but the constructive, or I coined the term remodeling feedback on another episode, so I'm going to use that, but something that requires feedback that may require a little bit of demo to help you build back something even better. It is kind of how I think of feedback on both of those things. So keep doing what you're doing and continue in your journey and do it better, or do you have to maybe do a little bit of demo on something that isn't working and isn't functioning for you so that you can build back even better? Is that fair?
It is fair. And I would also say there is a spectrum here, and you'll hear this pretty consistently in a lot of what we talk about. We talked a lot about non-binary thinking, and this plays into that thought process or that mindset, that paradigm. So I experience a lot of the world on a spectrum now that I have really uncovered and unpacked that binary thought process and how often it was showing up for me. When I have removed that, everything shows up, almost everything can show up on a spectrum. And that is true of feedback. So if you think of it, and it's not a positive or negative, it is just, and on this side, you may have your strengths, and those strengths, you get to expand that spectrum, which is what's so beautiful about this, is it's never defined. It is finite. You can shrink it, you can expand it. Those strengths, you have the ability to expand that spectrum out even wider. And on the other side, you have the opportunity to keep looking, because I promise you, it goes deeper than, you might be tapping at a surface level thing here, there may be something way on the other side deeper that you can expand your view. You don't have to. We talked about those files that we put deep down and we lock them behind this closed door, and in your mind you just know that's off limits. We
Mhm.
don't go there. The few times I've tried to go there, it didn't turn out well, so we're just going to keep it over there behind that lock and key and never look at that file again. Well, one day you may find a time when you're ready to pull out that file, because I promise you there's something in there that is running in the background and is influencing something in your life,
Yeah.
something in your world.
Yep,
Don't
absolutely.
open the file until you're ready to open the file and you're ready to look at it. Like, that is completely fair and valid.
Yeah.
But the goal of this journey is that you expand that spectrum, you keep expanding it farther and farther. So that's how, again, another way to define it. And that's why we say the definition is so rich, because to access it, there are lots of different ways to view it. There's a lot of us think differently. So we're trying to give you as much language around, how we see it, how we view, how it has influenced us, because we want you to be able to access feedback in the way that it can be life altering, life changing for you. And
Yeah.
it can be,
Yeah.
even when it's difficult
Yeah.
feedback, especially when it's difficult feedback.
Right? I was just thinking that too, because we referenced earlier that feedback is a gift, and I know that you and I both feel that way very strongly. And the reason it's a gift is because people don't have to give it. Like, especially to your point, the rich feedback. It's very easy to say to somebody, "You're doing a great job." And that's not dismissive. It's great to hear that. It's always great to hear that, but that's not feedback. So I will add to our definition, like, that is a compliment. Those are great, valid, wonderful to hear. And when we talk about feedback, we are talking about something very specific. You are pointing to examples. You are saying, this is the thing I'm talking about. You're either doing it amazingly well and keep doing it, grow in that, or this is a way that you may not even know that you're having impact on the world around you, and it may not be the greatest impact. And how can you grow in that space? And I'm kind of leading into the qualified and unqualified feedback, but we don't have to give each other that as humans. Like, nobody's entitled to that, nobody's owed that. And so when you do receive it, it is an amazing gift. It's kind of like if you ever got a gift for like Christmas or your birthday or whatever, and you opened it and you're like, I would have never thought to get this gift, but then it's like something that like alters your life, right? You're like, I use it every day. It has changed how I do things. It's amazing. Like, feedback has the opportunity to be that for you in your everyday life.
Yes. And to your point, I know we're leading into the qualified versus unqualified, but
Let's do it. Let's bring it.
well, I was just going to say, to your point about the experience of receiving the gift when people don't have, it's not required. We actually don't have a society that fully supports or empowers us to be very thoughtful about feedback. In fact, we're quite living in the opposite of that from a societal standpoint. There's even criticism, I think, the way that we teach each other about what criticism is and how to receive it in a way that allows you to unpack it. It's not necessarily shown in a light of gift giving and or gift receiving in a positive way. It is very much like, oh, this is a negative experience, but you can suit up and armor up so that you can receive it and get what you need from it. The word that I'm looking for is escaping me, but it's an adversarial, conflicting experience. And the reality is it doesn't have to be that way. It does. Even the difficult, critical feedback, it can be difficult to receive, but it doesn't have to be such an abrasive experience. It really doesn't. And that partially comes from us receiving feedback from people who are not qualified to give it to us.
Yeah.
So there is a real science around who we receive feedback from. And the tricky part about this is you do need to be really thoughtful and discerning, because our brain and our bodies want to be comfortable. Like, we want it to be easy. We want it to be minimal conflict at all times. Like, our bodies are designed to create comfort, to shy away from anything that's conflicting, that's dangerous. And so it can be really tricky if you just say, okay, well, I'm going to discern my feedback through this qualified, unqualified lens. You'll tend to put everyone in the unqualified box if you just surface level it. If you're just like response, reaction, unqualified, 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 especially when it's things that you don't want to hear. So the caution here is it requires us to be very thoughtful about how we're defining what's qualified and unqualified. So I caveat the opening of this discussion with, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not as easy as, I don't know this person, so that's unqualified feedback, because that is not a qualifier. That's not a definer of who is qualified versus who's unqualified. So let's talk a little bit, let's dig a little bit deeper into that qualified, unqualified feedback phenomenon.
For sure. Yeah. And I think the other caveat that I would add is this is really where self-awareness and self-mastery and self-actualization comes in, because when you know who you are and you are comfortable who you are confident in who you are and your person, then it's not easy. I'm not going to say that, but it is easier to kind of wade through some of that. So when we say qualified and unqualified, I think we've all had the experience where somebody has said something to us. I think I referenced it in another episode, like a drive-by feedback drop, where it's just like something negative, and I will use that term very intentionally here, that's just dropped on us that feels like it came out of nowhere. We can have qualified, unqualified, positive feedback too, but I think it comes up most often in the more difficult feedback to receive. And it can often be, sometimes it's online in response to something that we've posted on social media, for example, or sometimes it's a stranger on the street, or sometimes it's, whoever, and it just kind of hits you in the face. And we have that visceral body response that you were talking about, like your stomach turns and you get sweaty palms, you may flush. And those are the times, and I heard, and I would attribute it if I remember who it is, but I heard once that type of feedback, don't dismiss it. Whoever it was, and if you hear this and it was you, please email me because I would love to attribute it to you, but they put it on a shelf. And it's not actionable feedback, but they put it on a shelf and they just kind of keep track of it over the next several months to see if it's actually qualified feedback. Is it something that is showing up in other places? Are they hearing it from other people? Are they hearing it from trusted advisors who will tell them the truth and not just tell us what we need to hear? We all need those people in our life. And I thought that was such brilliant advice, because you don't get rid of it. You don't dismiss it just because you don't like it. It's not, forever and ever gone. But if after, 6 months or however long, you're like, that was a one-off comment that I have never heard from any of these other people again, dismiss it. That most likely came from a place that is not helpful or constructive for you. And then qualified feedback, I think, are those trusted advisors, those people in our sphere. Would you ask them for advice? Do you value what they say? We need to listen when those people talk to us and share things with us and say, hey, you're doing this really great, keep going. Or, hey, you probably don't even know this is happening, because it comes from a place of good intent. It comes from a place of, I want you to be a better human. Whereas unqualified feedback often is about that person and things that they have going on, and something has triggered something for them, and their intent is out of hurt or reaction or whatever other emotion that we don't know, but it's not intended to be helpful for you.
Very much so. And to be completely honest, there is still feedback that is available to you, accessible to you in the unqualified feedback. So I absolutely love the analogy. I was in that room and I do not remember who that was. So apologies to whoever we're quoting and didn't give you credit for it. Take the credit.
We'll post it on the description if you email us and tell us.
And even if it is something that you're like, wow, that was a one-off, I'm going to dismiss that, there is still something accessible to you, which I think is the beautiful part of getting to a space where you're closer to self-actualization. Here is, there can be a space where you're automatically assessing, like, okay, that is clearly about them, but what about my presence, my statement, my activity, my behavior caused the reaction.
Mhm.
What, I cannot unpack what's going on with them that created the response that occurred, but I can think about, if I'm out in the world and I'm speaking to someone, did I show up in a way, how did I show up? And the answer may be I'm pretty happy with, all of the things. I'm happy with the language I used. I'm happy with my body language. I'm happy with my intention was clear,
Mhm.
and I believe the impact of all of the ways that I showed up in that moment aligned to my intention. So I don't believe that there was anything that I can adjust or anything that I might do differently in the future. Yes, this was my intention, and I'm really happy with all of these aspects, but I used this phrasing or this language, and I can see how that might trigger someone, if they're having their own challenges or issues. I could see how this language might be triggering to anyone who might be having an issue with XYZ. So there's always an opportunity, even in the unqualified feedback. So I would never dismiss the unqualified feedback until I've had an opportunity. I would never dismiss my ownership in a conversation or in a role or in, whatever it is, whatever the scenario is, the situation is. People give us feedback on the podcast.
Mhm.
And we have to look at it as, is this qualified feedback? Is it unqualified feedback? And even if it's unqualified feedback, there's something there for us.
Yeah.
There's something there for us to assess, for us to unpack, uncover, and we may reach a conclusion that we don't believe anything needs to change or adjust. More often than not, there is something. So I wouldn't dismiss it, even if it's a one-off and doesn't get qualified by other folks. And I say that just because I don't think any feedback should be dismissed.
Mhm.
Period. There are obviously people who are intentionally trying to cause harm, intentionally trying to be hurtful. That's not feedback, period. We're not talking about trolls on the internet. We're not talking about people who have intent to harm you. We're not talking about people who are coming after you because they want to fight. And by fight, I don't mean physically. I mean,
I hope
that
not.
too. That is also not feedback if they're coming after you, ready for a fight. But that is different and apart. What we are talking about, is somebody saying something about your presence or about you, how you're showing up in a moment. And that is very different than I'm here because I don't like what you said. And I'm going to be really clear about, trolling you or saying something nasty to you. That's not feedback, period. So it doesn't get qualified or unqualified. So that's a whole different category of response that doesn't count as feedback. We're talking about something that if somebody says something that you're like, oh, did I do that? Did I do something, like, did I say something that would cause that response or reaction? I think those things are fairly obvious when they come up, but man, the number of people that read trolling comments on social media and use that as feedback, that is not qualified or unqualified feedback. That is not feedback at all. Ignore them, put them away. They're not even part of this journey. They shouldn't be. They don't get to be part of this journey. Kick them off of your bus right now. They don't belong. And they don't have a ticket. They haven't been invited.
Yeah.
Them to your party right now.
Yes.
That's
Stop
not what
giving
we're talking about.
them free rent in your head. Get them out. But
Get them
I
out.
agree. And that is such an important clarification. Thank you. Because it is. That's why we want to define feedback, right? Because we hear something and we think, oh, that's feedback. There's something in there. No, it is not. So if you're good with it, I'd like to shift course a little bit because we've talked a lot about receiving feedback. And I think it's really important for us to talk about the giving of feedback too. You mentioned the people pleasers earlier, and I think we all, as administrative professionals, can identify with that a little bit. And so some of you might be palm sweating again and think, oh, I could never say something that might have a negative impact on somebody, or somebody might feel a certain way. Like, it's really hard for us. And so I think you and I have had countless conversations about how we can do this. And I think your process is really brilliant in giving feedback that maybe, and you anticipate the other person having a difficult time hearing. So do you have any tips for the
I do.
audience?
I do. First of all, I do want to recognize the folks in the room who are conflict averse. Many of us are walking among, each other every day. And to be completely fair, people assume that those of us who, and I'm trying to think of that, this is from other people assigning it to me. I don't assign it to myself, but I have heard people say like, "Oh, you're really good at giving feedback." So clearly you don't mind conflict. You're fine with it. You don't mind having the difficult conversation. And I'm like, let me tell you a little bit about how I feel in those moments. It's still a process for me. I don't enjoy conflict. And if someone does enjoy conflict, that is something that they need to unpack. It is part of human nature. It is scientifically proven that we talked about it earlier, that we are built to avoid conflict. Like our brain is constantly like, how do we avoid danger? Oh, dangerous situation. Don't ever want that to happen again. We're going to create paths and roads so that it never occurs again. So if someone actually gets joy from conflict, there literally is something that you need to unpack there. Real talk. There's some feedback probably. You probably need to do some reflection. So I don't enjoy conflict just because I am okay with having difficult conversations with people. There is a process involved. You do need to be very thoughtful. First and foremost, I really do require relational currency with someone before I deliver difficult feedback to them. Now, will I give difficult feedback to someone in the absence of relational currency if I have to? If it is going to impede or have tremendous impact on other people, or I'm trying to think of other situations because it has happened a few times in recent history. On behalf of the association, for instance, as the CEO of an association, I have some responsibility here for the path of our business. If I have to give someone difficult feedback, because if I don't, there is a risk or a liability potentially to the association, I will absolutely do that. Do I want to do that? No. I prefer to have relational currency in every exchange because it has tremendous impact on the delivery and the reception and your ability to actually deliver meaningful, rich feedback to someone. It's directly correlated to whether or not you have relational currency built up so that there's trust in the room, that your intention is known. You can approach that conversation knowing that there's already a foundation of respect and trust and known intention at the base, at the core. It will be much more effective if you've got that established. Not to say that it cannot happen in the absence of it, because sometimes it's absolutely necessary that you give someone feedback when you don't have relational currency. But if it's possible to build up some relational currency in a space where it's absent before you say the difficult thing you need to say to someone, that is always going to lend you better outcomes in the conversation. So that's number one, is, establish some relationship and rapport with someone before you go in with, hey, this behavior is showing up in this way and it's impacting XYZ. You should really look at it before you say a hard truth or a difficult criticism or difficult feedback. Relational currency can make a huge difference. It can make a huge difference on how well the other person hears and receives the feedback. So it's not just about your comfort and being more comfortable. It's all about the person on the other side, because if you give the feedback and they don't hear it, or they get defensive and deflect it, you haven't been effective. The whole point of giving the feedback is you want someone to hear it so that they can receive it, unpack it, change a behavior so that it does change the impact of that behavior and how it shows up in the future. So relational currency is a big one. The other thing I will say is preparation. So thoughtful preparation about that conversation for yourself. And if you have a trusted partner, and this gets tricky because you certainly don't want to go give the feedback you need to give to someone else to another person.
Right.
This is not an invitation to go complain and vent about this situation, about this other person, to a trusted.
No triangles.
No triangles and no gossip. But if you need to talk through your thought process and strategy for the delivery of your feedback, establish someone who is a trusted partner in that space. Rachel and I serve often as that person where we both know, number one, we're going to hold each other accountable if it starts to spiral into a venting space where we're just complaining about the other person, because that behavior not only has impact on other people, but it's having impact on us. That's the part of why we need to give the feedback. It's a very slippery slope. I know Rachel will hold me accountable if I ever start to get out of the, here's what I'm thinking, here's how I think I want to navigate this conversation. Here are the key things that I know I want to say, but I want to be open. As I'm talking through that, if I start to spiral, Rachel's going to say, hey, time out.
We've lost the thread.
We have lost it. Let's get back on track, and vice versa. I will say the same thing. If you have a trusted partner, it's a fabulous way, especially if you're an external processor. It's a fantastic way to be thoughtful about your approach to the conversation. And you must be thoughtful. Must is a strong word. Obviously, it is entirely up to you if you choose to prepare, but you will be more effective. The outcome will be more fruitful if you are thoughtful about your preparation. And lastly, all that thought and preparation is phenomenal and fantastic. And I think it will prepare you better for the conversation. But when you walk into the conversation, you need to be open. You need to be open, and it will never take the path that you have decided in your mind the conversation needs to go. Not once has that ever happened to me where I'm like, okay, I'm prepared. Here are my, key talking points. I've got them all aligned in my mind. These are the things that I know are critical. I need to say. Never, ever has it gone like boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Case closed. Your feedback received. We're done here. It's a conversation. It should be a dialogue, a discussion. You do not want to walk in, and there are some exceptions to that I'll share, but be open in the conversation to listen to the other person. That preparation is just going to give you a really solid framework to enter the conversation and know, I don't want them to take us off the rail. So it will help keep guardrails on the conversation for you. So if it does start to veer because they're deflecting, you'll know how to course correct and bring them back on track. Bring them back to the point of the conversation. That's what the preparation will help you do, but you need to be open and listen to the other person. It is a dialogue. It is a conversation. They need to feel heard. They need to know that you are open in order for you to say the difficult thing and for them to be able to hear it. There are some exceptions to that. And that is, if you're in an employment situation and you need to deliver, you have to deliver some feedback as a manager or supervisor. There are times when you're going to have to say, I need you to know these are things from a performance, especially, if someone's getting a performance improvement plan, or you're delivering some feedback that's going into an HR file, there are times when you need to be crystal clear about, these are the objectives of this conversation. I have delivered them. Do you hear them? That is different and apart from what we're talking about in terms of a feedback conversation. So I just caveat that because I want to be really clear that that's not what we're talking about when we say a feedback conversation. Those supervisory and I hate the word disciplinary, especially in the workplace, because I'm like, we're all adults here. And corporate culture and workplace culture still uses a very punitive system very often. So I don't want to create confusion between what we're talking about when we say a feedback discussion or dialogue and a human resources or a supervisory disciplinary conversation with an employee. Two totally separate things.
Yeah. And those tips are amazing. And I think I would add another one, if I may. If you have an opportunity to do so, it's always great, especially if you anticipate it's going to be difficult for the other person to hear what you're going to say, is ask permission. Or if you aren't able to ask permission, at least say, hey, I've got something really important that I want to talk with you about. It may be hard for you to hear. Is now a good time? Is tomorrow a good time? Because we never know what people are going through, right? I will be honest, in my past, I've had somebody who has wanted to deliver feedback to me, and I had to say, you know what, I hear you. I appreciate where you're coming from. I cannot do it today. And that is also a part of self-awareness, right? Like if we don't give the other person the agency to be able to say, this, and this has happened, and my emotions are here, we're not going to be effective. So if we are able to ask permission, or at least kind of give a warning is such a horrible word, an indication of what may be coming, that we can give somebody the opportunity to say, no, I would love to hear it. Tell me now. Or, you know what, I've got so much going on. I cannot take one more thing. Let's talk tomorrow. Like, don't let them keep pushing it off, so that it's not able to be continually an excuse. You still have the ownership to need to say what you need to say, but respect where the other person is in their own space and when they might be at a good place to hear what you have to say.
Excellent advice. And I will tell you that works beautifully, especially in the workplace setting, giving someone an opportunity to say today is not the day. And even if it is an okay time for them, it sets both of you up for more success if they know coming in, this may be a difficult conversation. Because if you think about the experience of walking into, especially when you have relational currency, which is, what we're advocating that you have, you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, how's so and so, and how was your weekend? Or, did you do the thing that you said you were going to do? How was the movie? And you're like, oh, it was great, and I have something really difficult to say to you. That can be a really hard transition.
Jarring.
Yeah, it's a very jarring. It can be hard for you as the feedback giver, and it can be very hard for the feedback recipient to shift from, oh, I thought this was a comfortable conversation, to, uh-oh, what are you about to tell me that I don't want to hear? So it sets everyone up for more success if you are upfront in advance. So I love that is a fabulous tip that Rachel and I both employ anytime that we are giving feedback. And to be honest, I try to do that even if it is not difficult feedback to hear, because we also want to normalize that, feedback, even when it's a difficult thing. So what we're saying is we recognize this might be hard for you to manage. It's not bad though. We're not firing you because we see an opportunity for you. So undoing some of the punitiveness that we all have around feedback. And I know a lot of our workplace cultures don't support that, don't align to that. I don't know how many times in my tenure as a leader at IAAP that I have experienced, and this is not a joke, I have experienced calling someone or messaging them to say, hey, do you have a minute? Can we meet? And their response is, do I need a box? And they are being both sarcastic and literal at the same time. It is a defense response, a defense mechanism that comes from cultural experiences that we have that say, like, if the boss calls you and says that they need a minute, it could be 50-50 that, you may get fired, or it may literally just be a question about a workflow or a report or, something happening in the business. So those are real.
Yeah.
Those are real things that we all have to unpack and uncover and navigate each and every day. So if, as the feedback giver, we recognize those things are baked into our cultures, our workplace cultures, it can actually create a better experience and a better outcome by understanding that dynamic exists. So we need to figure out how we can mitigate those responses as best we can, because the whole goal of this is that the person arrives to the conversation as open as possible and ready as possible to receive whatever it is you have to deliver. And we need to be just as open and ready to receive the response, because every time, and I didn't say this explicitly before, every time I've had a difficult feedback conversation, there's something in the response that I didn't know, that I didn't have. There's some additional context. There is, in that conversation, we discover, there's other things in the ecosystem that are influencing this. It's not just a behavior response from one person. That feedback expands and becomes richer because it's a two-way conversation. So I learn things in that dialogue that are also feedback for me every time that I've had those conversations. So being open as the feedback giver to know that this isn't just about you delivering feedback. It is it becomes a reciprocal kind
Mhm.
of living, breathing environment
Mhm.
where you're giving, but you're also receiving some of the feedback and the context, and your vision of what is occurring expands.
And always for the benefit of each other, our personhood, the organization, however it is that, and we've said it a few times, and I think it bears repeating, the intent should always be from a place of building up, not tearing down. The goal, even if it's a momentary tearing down because the person, it was hard to hear, like whatever, what we've talked about, ultimately the intent and the goal is to build back up to even better. And as long as we go into those conversations knowing that that is our intention and being confident, to your point, we always learn different ways to deliver feedback, different things that are happening, things that we can contribute. And hopefully that's the same for the other person. But we can all go to sleep at night confidently knowing that that was our intention. And even if we need to tweak how we showed up, that we can be confident that that is the best intention. And we have a responsibility as professionals, as admins, as humans, help each other be our best selves. I believe that to my core. And that is really the purpose of why you and I wanted to share this as a podcast episode, because it's at the base of it, we have a responsibility to show up for each other. And in the good times and the bad, the hard times and the positive times, all of the idioms that we know.
Yeah. Yes. And it is also fair that you get to decide where you expend that energy.
Mm,
So there are plenty of times where, you know, you have someone on the other side who isn't interested, who
mhm,
isn't open, isn't curious, has zero desire to hear what you have to say. And you also have to decide, like, is this relationship, if it's a workplace relationship, is it required? Is
yeah.
it required for me to do my job effectively, that I foster and nurture this relationship and provide this person feedback? And if the
Mhm,
answer is yes, then you have to keep working. You have to
yeah.
keep trying. You have to keep looking for ways. But if this is a personal relationship and they are not showing up open and curious, and the impacts of their behaviors are so damaging and harmful to
Mhm,
you that it's causing some sort of literal harm in your world, end the relationship.
yeah.
You have that choice. So
Yeah.
you do not have that obligation to I completely agree with you, Rachel, that we do have a
Yes.
responsibility to one another, and you have a responsibility to yourself.
Right. Mhm,
Know and understand when a relationship has reached its core, reached the
mhm,
end of its course.
mhm,
So you can absolutely make the decision that that person isn't open to
mhm.
receiving my feedback. They're not interested in it. Invest in people and the relationships who are open.
Yes.
And recognize when, you get to go through that decisioning process. Is this a required relationship in my life and in my world? And you get to define that. Some people define that as a family member, as a required. Some people are like, no,
Mhm,
there's no, family does not mean required relationship. If the other person on the other side of this relationship isn't open and curious, doesn't care about the impact, is causing harm to me, it doesn't matter what their title is or their connection to me is.
mhm,
I have ownership over who gets to be in my world, in my
mhm,
sphere, and
mhm,
I choose these relationships, the people
mhm.
who are open. That is entirely up to you.
Absolutely. Yes. Great clarification as well.
Yes.
Okay.
We
So
could talk about this for several more episodes.
I was going to
I
say
mean, we didn't even get to
clearly.
share any of our examples, which are I think we have some really great
We
feedback
do.
examples, but we will save those for a future episode so that we're not here for 4 hours.
We do. We do. Clearly, we feel strongly about it. So, but in all seriousness, like this really is the game changer, and it takes practice. So, if I can end with anything, like this is not necessarily a switch that's flipped. So, do not get discouraged, both giving and receiving, if it doesn't feel like a gift yet, if it doesn't feel um, possible to give someone else feedback. It takes continual practice, continual growth. So, but it's worth it. That's what we
Yes.
can say. It is worth it. It is worth the effort. It is worth the work. And we invite you to do that with us to create a better world for us all.
Yes. Please join us.
All right. Well, we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, y'all. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Desk Admin Advocates. We hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of admins with us.
Remember, this podcast isn't just about listening, it's about taking action. Whether it's advocating for yourself in the workplace or supporting your fellow admins, let's continue to elevate this profession together. If you have any thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes, don't hesitate to reach out to us on social media or through our website.
Until next time, keep pushing beyond the desk. And remember, change begins with you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.